for joining me in this session where we will be talking about the new workplace normal and how, as the world is progressing, and how the focus on employees' emotional well-being is so important in these unprecedented times. As we know, the pandemic hit us around February, March, some even earlier in some countries, some later. And the entire workforce has totally changed from what has happened. And so a lot of restructuring, even some companies overnight that things needed to be restructured, employees need to work from home in less than 24 hours. And so a lot of organizations are going through some redefinition of what actually working is all about. Now, in this short keynote session, what I really want to do is to give you some hard data on exactly what has happened throughout this entire pandemic and how the pandemic has caused effects on emotional well-being of the entire workforce, right? So I got all this data from Qualtrics. Qualtrics is one of the largest data-driven company where they collect data and surveys around the world. And so they did this study of more than 2,000 employees around places such as France, Germany, New Zealand, Singapore, UK, and the US. And what they have seen is that ever since the pandemic started, the stress levels of workforce has increased. 66.9% of people reported higher stress levels since the outbreak. Only 8.2% reported lower stress levels since the outbreak. And what they found out is that the stress mostly comes from people's worry about contracting COVID-19. Which is understandable because I think around March and April, that was when new information was just being gathered around the world about what COVID-19 really is about. And so there were a lot of concerns about how do we even contract it, right? There are a lot of stress around financial pressures because people were starting to be retrenched and let go, not sure about what the future will hold. People being stressed that they are stuck at home. Loneliness, social isolation, and fears about job security. Now, Qualtrics also measured the levels of anxiety since the coronavirus outbreak, and 57.2% reported more anxiety since the outbreak. Now, this is like really staggering numbers, and I really wanted to show this to all of you because as leaders and HR of the organizations, when you see this data being presented to you, you start to realize that a lot of your employees are going through the stresses and anxiety that is prevalent around the world. Now, when we talk about mental health symptoms, what Qualtrics realized from their studies is that 53.8% of people felt more emotionally exhausted. And what I want all of you to take note of here in these statistics is every category of this is so specific, right? Where we're not just talking about physical exhaustion, we're talking about emotional exhaustion, right? We're talking about increased sadness in their day-to-day life. We're talking about irritability, the feelings of confusion, insomnia, anger, and feelings of guilt, right? Now, these are all common human emotions that we have all heard of before. But knowing that there is an increase in these symptoms since the COVID-19 outbreak, it's so important as HR professionals especially to see what can be done. How can now we put in the human element to rectify all that has happened, right? Now, I want to question all of you. How is this different from the past? Because questions about mental health in the workplace, stress and anxiety and burnout in the workplace, these are all issues and topics that many HR conferences have talked about before, right? But how is this now different from what it was before the coronavirus? And to understand this, I really want to bring up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure many of us would have seen this pyramid before. This Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about all our human needs, from our basic needs to our psychological needs to our self-fulfillment needs. And if you've gone through this pyramid before, you know that we start at the bottom of the pyramid. So as human beings, Our basic needs would be food, a place to sleep, water, clean, hygienic water, right? And we move on to safety, our financial security, our health, right? And then we move up to love and belonging, friendships, intimacy, relationships, connections. Then we move up to esteem, our respect, status, recognition, right? Confidence. And then, of course, we move up all the way to the top of the pyramid, which is self-actualization. Now, what has this got to do with the presentation today? What we realize is that COVID-19 most affected the first three layers of the hierarchy of needs. Now, you know that, if we take away even just the first layer, which is your biological and physiological needs. Imagine taking some people lost their main breadwinner overnight. Talk about family. Some people are isolated from their family because lockdown happened in certain countries and they were apart or away in those moments. And so when COVID-19 happened, the first three layers are the most badly affected. And so when in your workplace, as HR professionals, you speak to so many different people, even as managers, right? You're in contact with your team members. Now, I want to tell you the symptoms that you want to look out for. And when you hear in these conversations, this kind of things that they are talking about, then you want to take note that, some parts of the first three levels of their Maslow's hierarchy of needs are being shaken, right? When you see symptoms such as, a person taking twice as long to complete a usual workload, when they talk about feeling overwhelmed, feeling physically exhausted all the time, when you notice an increased anger or irritability at work, and even when they mention that they are being very irritated at home, unable to manage their emotions in a way that they are usually able to, when they talk about having poor sleep patterns or insomnia, persistent sadness, impulsivity, or reckless behavior that you don't usually observe in that person. These are all symptoms that a person's emotional well-being is being affected. Now, I thought that, this data that Qualtrics collected on this question was really interesting. So they asked this in their study. If you were going to talk to someone about a mental health concern, who do you believe could help you the most? Now, 35.6% reported that their coworker or their peer. And following through, 33.5% said that their manager or supervisor can help them. And then someone from HR with 19.5%. Now, I was really surprised when I read this data because I would think that, when if you have like if you suspect to have like a certain physical illness or a mental illness, you would probably talk to your family first, right? But the study showed that a coworker or a manager or supervisor are people whom an employee would go to first. So that goes to show how important our roles as leaders, managers, and HR professionals are in an organization. And when you think about it, we spend more than 70% of our waking hour at a workplace, right? So, as much as we don't think deeply into it, but close relationships, deep connections are built in workplaces. So, do we see how there are so many opportunities and even unlearning that we need to do in terms of who we are as a manager, as a HR professional? So, I want to ask you, how can leaders and HR respond to situations? So in the study, participants were asked about how often would you like to receive communications regarding the coronavirus situation. I mean, if you remember, when this whole pandemic first broke out during March and April, we were getting information from everywhere, different news channel, even from social media, different people were saying different things, right? But what's interesting is that 91.5% people said that they would like communication from their employers at least once a week regarding the coronavirus situation. That's how much trust, right? That's how much trust the employees have on their employers. Now, I want to mention that HR professionals should strive for early and often communication to employees, including honest and transparent information about what you know and even what you don't know, and about how the pandemic will affect issues such as job security as the situation develops, right? And the most important key point here is to be transparent and consistent. If 91.5% of your employees would really want to hear from you, the employer, then yes, that's the least that you can do, is to be transparent and consistent, even in what we don't know. So what can leaders and HR do? I've got 5 key points here. The first one is to make it personal. It's always personal, right? The pandemic is personal. It affects people to the very core of their family, right? Their life, their livelihood, right? So it is a personal matter. So make it personal, right? Make it consistent. Whatever information as a leader or HR professional that you are giving to your employees, make it consistent once a week, right? Make it creative. There are so many ways that you can be creative about how to rally everyone together to come together in this challenging times, and helping them to understand what you as an organization are also powering through. Make it sustainable. The thing is that no one knows when the end of this pandemic is going to end, right? We thought that, many people thought that by July it would end, and then it became August, and now we're almost at the end of August. How long more, right? So many more people are working from home. Some people are still looking for jobs and having so much challenges looking for new jobs out there, and certain industries are a lot more badly affected than the rest, right? So in every communication and information, and even in the new processes that you are doing, think about the sustainability of it, right? How would that be sustainable in the next 3 months, 6 months, a year, right? Make it credible. People want to know that every information and processes comes from the top, and there is a face to it, right? Again, as we were in an earlier panel discussion before this, I was sharing that HR is not about policies, and I think a lot of HR get that the other way around, right? HR, what is HR? The basic part of HR is human resources. Bring in the human element to it. It's always people over policies, never policies over people. So make it credible. Whatever new systems or processes that you have in place, have a leader come face to face with it, share it, right? Here, there are some really practical examples that I have here, which I hope that you guys can help all of you. It's a little bit long, but I thought that it'd be a really great idea to just share some practical tools here as well. Online toolkits and resources, right? So these are really helpful for employees to know that they can continuously work on themselves. Quick round of check-ins at the very beginning of every virtual meeting, just to have a pulse check of what's going on around everyone's mind, what's going on around everyone's life. A minute, everyone could just say a sentence or two. Informal videos from leaders. This is what I meant earlier on by making it credible. Informal videos from leaders that are empathetic and talk personally, helping people understand that even their leaders know what they are going through, right? And even leaders who would be vulnerable enough to share what they are going through personally. Host virtual manager meetups. Take time for self-care, of course. HR to role model, right? It's so important for HR to be the role model in this, and to help people know that they can talk about mental health, right? And what's important for us to know is that there are some people who are struggling and some people who are thriving. Some struggling, some thriving. So it's so important to use a combination of science, technology, data, and analytics, right? To understand your employees, just as how you understand your customers. All right. Take ownership and accountability for their own well-being and to support the integration of life while working at home. Last but not least, I want to say this. People are social creatures and organizations are social institutions. Whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, all humans require some connection with others. So for leaders and HR, the old rules may not apply right now. And this is your opportunity to reinvent. And if all policies aren't meeting the current needs of your teammates, change them. You have all the freedom to change them right now. Thank you very much.